can I please invite Cam, Leanne, Mike and Andrew up. We're going to be reflecting on a career in the advisory services. So hopefully you've got loads of questions to ask them. Combined, they've got, I nearly tallied it up and then I got scared that I'd get it wrong. But combined, they've got a lot of years of experience amongst them in lots of different areas. This session's really designed to be a discussion, so I've got some questions here to prompt you. We're going to have some mics roving around for you guys to ask questions, so please don't hold back. We have heard a little bit about everybody except for Mike. You've managed to stay off the program till now, Mike. Mike is the president of the Ballarat Mechanics Institute, and he's also the director and senior farm business consultant at Meridian Agriculture. Mike worked as a farm manager from the late 1960s to the early 1980s, and in 1983 he founded the company now trading as Meridian Agriculture. Mike's seen a few changes in the ag industry, and he's also served as mentor and or employer to many advisors, probably a lot of them in the room. I'm not going to say too much more about everybody because I've actually tasked them with introducing themselves. So I'm going to pass first to Leanne because she's closest. Leanne.
Thanks, Meg. As you know, I've introduced myself as... How's that? Yep. Okay. So, as you know, I work with Pinion Advisory and I'm based in Tassie, and I've actually been with the business for 16 years through 3 mergers and 3 name changes. And I guess my skill sets straddle the enviro sustainability part of the business and the farm biz teams, and I'd probably describe myself as a sustainability-focused generalist. In my role, I really only do a very small amount of one-on-one consulting, so probably I'm more a consultant than an advisor. And the majority of my works are working on projects, and I guess in that instance, my core skills are really around project management, communication, extension and training, monitoring and evaluation. And then I've got quite ranging technical expertise, if you'd call it expertise, probably more generalist-tese, if that's such a word, and it covers sheep production, grazing management, fire and ecology, biodiversity, weed management. So I really know a lot about many things and probably enough to be dangerous. And a bit of a snapshot just to give you a picture of some of the projects that I work on. So Andrew mentioned I work with him on the Fit to Join project. I'm part of the Livestock Advisor Updates Coordination team, doing work with Jess at Greenham's on sustainability and e-learning. So there's a whole range of stuff that I do. I started out with a general science degree and dabbled in a few ag subjects, worked as a lab rat at the uni in the plant breeding area, and then got a job as a plant breeder and researcher in hops, of all things. And then I started getting interested in sustainable ag and applying organic principles to the hop growing system, which is pretty hardcore and nuclear in many respects. And then after about 5 years, decided that I really wanted to pursue that sort of sustainable production focus and natural resource management. And then that was probably a fairly brave thing to do, I guess. And over the next 2 or 3 years, I really struggled to kind of find my niche. I set up my own consultancy, but I didn't like working on my own. I worked for the government, but as a project officer, but I didn't really like working for the government. Then I worked for Greening Australia, but I didn't really like not-for-profit. So once I got offered a job at ARM, or Agricultural Resource Management, I think I found my groove, and I really love the private sector and I love consulting. And the things I really love about it are you're always learning. You've just got the opportunity to take your career wherever you'd like, really, whatever interests you and whatever people are willing to pay for. And I guess one of the key sort of switches, as I said, I went from sort of doing being the company tree hugger really, and being mainly funded on Australian government land care type projects, and I could see the writing on the wall with that all drying up and thought, And then along came a merger and we ended up with Basil in our team, and I partnered up with him and started developing skills in grazing and sheep production, and now I'm really in that sweet spot where I can bring two things I'm really passionate about, which are livestock production and grazing management and sustainability together on a lot of the projects I'm doing. So I think I've got my groove and pretty lucky, really.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to follow up on. Thanks, Leanne. You got any notes there for me? So grew up Southern New South Wales, did vet science at Wagga Uni. I always said I wanted to be a vet when I was, 7 or 8 years of age, and I think in many ways I probably didn't really want to be a vet, but because I'd said it to everyone for so long, I thought I've really got to follow through on this. I like working with animals, and I like the grazing side of animals. I lasted about 4 or 5 months working with small animals or mixed animal clinic in a dairy-based clinic in northeast Victoria before they pretty well decided that I wasn't very good for the small animal clientele within the business and just kept pushing me out to the dairy cows, much to the disgust of the vets that were sort of 2 years ahead of me that were very good with large animals but much better with small animals than me. But they were pretty filthy with the fact that I kept doing the large animals, but it was essentially a good business decision for those guys, I think. And after 12 months in that job, I had an opportunity to buy into a vet clinic, a consultancy business with David Rendell in Hamilton, and he, I guess, was probably one of 2 or 3 sheep vets in Australia that actually had a business working with sheep producers, and I thought, yeah, that's awesome, and really thankful for him for that opportunity. So we set up a business called Livestock Logic, and it sort of grew to take on another small animal clinic and another mixed animal clinic in Hamilton. So we sort of grew to having 10 vets in this clinic, and as I said before, I ended up as a vet, but I probably wasn't that passionate about being a vet. And a few years ago, we had an opportunity to sell out of that business, which I was really keen to do because it allowed me to work with my clients as a consultant rather than sort of working in a business that was predominantly doing work that I wasn't that passionate about. So why am I telling that? I guess the reason I'm saying it is because what I really like about the consultancy work is the relationships you get to have with people, as opposed to being a clinical vet where you're going from A to B to C to D and everything's really rushed and you're fixing problems but not putting strategies in place to improve them long term. I only work with probably 40 people now, and I have really good relationships with them. Go on fishing trips together, we're good mates, we talk about all sorts of stuff, and yeah, it's nice working with a small group of people rather than trying to please a lot of people, and I think that's the opportunity that I guess a lot of you are starting to live, and plenty of you have been doing it for a long time. But yeah, to me that's the great thing about what we do, is that you can change people's businesses and have an impact on their lives, and it's really rewarding and good fun. And yeah, that's me.
Cam.
Started in the Victorian Department of Ag. Before that, I actually didn't come from a farm. Both mum and dad were from farms, but they were large families on small farms, and so it ended up at that stage that I grew up in Melbourne, went to Melbourne Uni. I don't know, I like something about agriculture, probably because of weekends on cousins' farms and stuff like that. So I ended up doing ag science, and in fact Matt McCarthy down the back there employed me for the first time in the Department of Ag in 1985, I think it was, up in Northern Victoria. And very lucky, had a 5-year apprenticeship, I'd call it, in the ag department. Learnt a huge amount of stuff, both from a technical point of view, but more importantly I had a supervisor at the time, a bloke by the name of Gun Jones, and he was quirky but unbelievably good with people and reading people, and I learnt so much that the job wasn't about just the technical stuff that you could impart and tell people, but how you actually worked and shaped your messages with people to understand where they're coming from, where they're trying to get to, and then you provided a good service because you could actually meld those two together. So I had 5-6 years there, then sort of moved a bit further south and ended up in a project with a group of farmers that want to do pasture improvement. So it's a bit like what you call your farming groups now, but in the early days it wasn't. And all I did was pasture improvement work with a group of what ended up to be just under 200 farmers over about 15 years. And so that was just direct advisory day after day. And that was in the olden days when you didn't have a mobile phone and you didn't have a computer, and you'd tee up all your appointments the night before on the phone and have to be there at a certain time, and you'd use a fire map to find out where the farms were, because you didn't have Google Maps, you didn't have anything to help you with that. But learnt the craft pretty well in that time. Running parallel with that, I did a master's in what was called agricultural development and learnt a lot about, again, that people side of it, decision-making side of it and so on. In that same time, though, where I was working in southwest Victoria, the enterprise mix was changing hugely. So it went from what was virtually 100% 100% grazing because it was too wet for cropping, and as cropping technology improved, both in varieties, agronomy, all that sort of stuff, there was a huge swing towards cropping and away from livestock. Also, enterprise returns were sort of part of that. And so I really had a choice of whether I went down the crop jockey path or whether I stayed in the livestock pastures part, even though there wasn't really a lot of work for that sort of thing. But I stayed in that. That's how I ended up in the mixed farming, so the grain and graze stuff that Meg alluded to earlier, that mixed farming space, that's sort of where I saw a niche and where I sort of started. And so that got me into project work, and I've been doing lots of different project work over the time. Still got a number of clients that I've had now for 25, 30 years, and we're just like mates rather than a client advisor relationship. And we've got our own farm as well that we started very small, and that sort of built up over time. So I've got a bit of skin in the game as well as sort of playing in the advisory space.
Thanks, Cam. Mike?
Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Cam. I'll just pick up on that before mobile phones. I used to be travelling a fair bit, and the best time to phone farmers was sort of between 6:30 and 7:30 at night. So I'd have a bag of money, a marble bag full of money, as well as a phone card that you could use in a public telephone, and I'd stop at about 6:30 and go through this list of calls that I needed to make. Yeah. And other people might want to use the telephone, and I'd say, well, I'm going to be a while. And particularly when we'd started the recruiting part of the business, that meant a lot of phoning. And so a lot of that was done in public phone boxes, in the cold, in the dark. I was part of we had a family farm at Appin, which is now, there's no farming at Appin now, that's south of Sydney. And when I was about 8, my father was the younger brother, and the farm wasn't big enough. When I was about 8, they decided that we'd better go and live in Sydney, and I said I wasn't going. But at 8, you don't get a lot of opportunity to exercise your individuality, so I went to Sydney and didn't transplant very well, so I left school at 15, went bush, was working, and it wasn't my main job, but I spent a lot of time at a place called Wallagarang Pastoral Company between Canberra and Goulburn, where they were doing a lot of experimental work. I used to spend every spare moment there. And while I was there, the owner of the place, a fellow called John Watson, literally tricked me into going to a short course that Marcus Oldham had on at Wallagarang. When I knew that's what he had in mind for me on Saturday afternoon, we had a fair sort of an argument about it. Anyway, he won, and I won because it seemed like a good idea once I started talking to him. And then there was a bit of an issue of trying to get some money, because I didn't have any money to go there, so I toddled off to the Snowy scheme, got the money, went to Marcus Oldham, became a farm manager pretty much straight away, managed through until 1983, and I was managing a place where we were shearing a couple of thousand bales of wool a year. And one of the beneficiaries of the estate decided that he was going to come and live near where I lived. I thought that wouldn't be a good idea, so I told him that I told the trustees that I'd resigned. I hadn't actually told them yet, but I did pretty soon after. Went home and said to my wife, well, we're off when we get the crop in. And we went on holidays and decided to start a business. So I don't recommend that anybody does what I did, because most other people in consulting had actually been working for another consulting firm or for a department or for a university or for a farm management college or something. I went from being a farm manager on Friday to a consultant on Monday with no clients. But anyway, I had a chainsaw and a ute and a trailer, so 3 days a week I'd work building fences and 2 days a week I'd work trying to find clients. Unlike Leanne, who had a lot of jobs, in the last 40 years, it's almost 40 years Meridian's been going, and I've had a new job about every 5 years because I get bored, but it just happens to be with the same company. Although I sort of started off as a generalist, what I do now is, apart from Salrac, which you've heard about, I'm its executive officer. And that's with saying I've usually had something like that I do as well as one-to-one consulting. And that's for two reasons. One is because it gets you out and allows you to interact with a whole lot of people. It gives a nice little foundation of income, and it allows you to have a contribution to industry that you can't get while you're just working one-to-one. So we like everybody in Meridian to have a combination of one-to-one and some project work, and I think most people would say that's a pretty good place to be. From a qualification point of view, I did that Marcus Oldham thing in the 60s, I did a Churchill in the 90s, I did a Masters in the 2000s, just at the beginning of 2000, and then I finished a PhD a few years ago on farm succession. It's farm succession that I now work on, and we've now got 3 of us and about to be 4 who spend about 60% of our time working on farm succession. The only other thing I'd say now is picking up on what Cam was saying about Gun Jones, and Gun was a real character of a fella, but understanding the client, understanding what the client was, what the client really wants, can take quite a long time. Sometimes it's the third or fourth visit that you really start to understand what the questions are. So that'll do for now.
Thanks, Mike. Has anybody got any questions so far from what's been raised? If you haven't, I've got a long list, and we've got a pretty good panel here, so I think we're all going to learn a fair bit from them. My first question is, why did you want to be an advisor? I'm going to start with Mike, just because I can pick on you.
Oh, well, Meg, I didn't. So I knew something about farm management, and I knew that I wasn't going to continue in the job that I was in, and we'd bought the place that we've got at Yendon, and we thought from the point of view of education for our kids, Yendon was the place to be rather than where we'd been where I was managing. So if I'm going to move to Yendon, what am I going to do? I know something about farm management, so I started what was a farm management company, and soon got some farms to manage, and then within a year or two found that I was saying to the owners of the farm, this bloke we put on as an overseer, doing a pretty good job, we need to give him more money. And that meant you had to give me less money. So I gradually morphed from being running a farm management company into being a consultant. So I didn't ever set out to be a consultant.
We're just going around?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, pass it on if you don't feel like you want to answer.
I will be quick.
Yeah.
I had 5 years with the department, as I said, and when I first joined the department, they were still doing one-to-one extension, and that was, you could see though the direction that was moving away from that one-to-one. I really love that. I love that interaction. I love that sort of, what do you call it, problem solving, for want of a better word, or opportunity, capturing opportunities. And I just saw that sort of diminishing. But hung in there long enough to get what I reckon was a really good skill base. So I was super fortunate there. I did actually start the consulting business the day my wife gave birth to twins. So went into the maternity room there and said, surprise, honey. I'm going consulting now and leaving a permanent job in the Department of Ag with a permanent wage. And off we went. So it was a bit of an adventure. We started a consulting business together. She had worked for the Weekly Times. She was a editor, livestock editor there for a while, and had a bit of a falling out with Rupert and co. So we started off together. And yeah, we went through the phase of trying to build a business and employ people, and I spent all my time trying to get money to employ people and thought, this has got hairs on it, I'm not doing all the things I like. So we've operated for 30 odd years just as like two independents, just picking the eyes out of what we like.
Yes, I think I probably said mine a little bit earlier. Like as a vet, I was interested in animals, really always very, very passionate about sheep, and to me it's probably the only way to really combine those two skills. It's very hard to be a sheep vet because sheep aren't worth enough to justify you looking at sheep. And I think if you think about income, if you can give your advice across tens of thousands of animals rather than individuals, it sort of makes sense to go down that path. And yeah, I think what Cam just said, like the problem solving aspect is what really excites me about the job. I probably didn't know, that's probably not why I became it, but it's probably what makes me so excited to turn up on someone's farm and not know what's going to unfold during the day, but to work through strategy and options for them. So yeah.
Well, I've already talked about my Goldilocks episode to find where I landed, and so it was a complete accident, but I guess I was always interested in agriculture and certainly passionate about sustainability, and kind of managed to bring them together in a career. And I guess, like Andrew, what I really enjoy about consulting is the being solutions and outcome focused, and being able to see the change and the impact of the work that you do. I also love the opportunity to learn new stuff, learn new things and follow your interests, and also to build relationships with people like your colleagues and clients and just other people in the industry who you work with.
No, I've got my own, thanks. We have a question. Olivia.
Thanks. I guess I was just thinking about the topical conversations we've had now to do with carbon and sustainability. And so I was interested for you to reflect on your career about when you started. What were some of those topical issues that now maybe have been resolved or actually haven't been resolved, but how have they progressed? Envisioning that by the time we get to some level of experience that you have, these issues that we've just discussed will have moved on too. So.
I can have first crack at that. I'd say that best practice grazing management's been known for many, many years, and we're still talking to producers about best practice grazing management. So I'd say it doesn't ever get resolved, but I'd say in the 16 years that I've worked in consulting, or probably the few years before that when I started working more in agriculture, sustainability was very much, it was all government funded. It was kind of, being subsidised to go out to producers. It was kind of from the top down, really. And what the shift I've seen is now that it's being pulled through the supply chain. It's a lot more producers are actively engaging with it because they can see the productivity benefits. So I'd say the shift I've seen is that it's becoming more mainstream. We've got natural capital accounting now, which in future is hopefully going to be putting sustainability measures in the balance sheet. So that's kind of the shift I've seen.
You don't have to answer, but if you've got something to contribute, you can.
Mulesing, I think that's been really well handled in Australia. But no, in all seriousness, I think the big one for me has probably been, and just the timing of when I finished uni, was Lifetime U brought about our reproductive rates, really substantial improvements. And I guess it's just on the back of a fantastic training program that allowed us to work with farmers, and farmers love working on their animals, which is what that is. So probably haven't had the length of career of these guys, but that's been the big one that I've seen change in 10 years, is that ability to improve repro. And I remember sitting in uni hearing that repro, you can't it's hard to improve fertility in animals, but we think about now in the role of condition score, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that if you feed them, that we just think about it second nature now, but 20 years ago, it wasn't really something that was top of mind for people.
Mine would be in the natural resource management space. When I was employed because Victoria was going to be drowned through salinity with rising water tables. So there was all this money that went into that, and we've solved that problem now because no one's talking about it, so did a good job on that one. And then we moved into the early land care stuff, which really was heavily driven by farmers wanting to improve their management, particularly weeds, rabbit control, vermin control and soil management. And that in the early days, if you look back now to where we were 30, 40 years ago, the landscape is so different. It is so different. We just don't appreciate it because if you haven't been around 40 years to know how shitful it was beforehand, you don't realise when you drive through some of this country now and go, oh, there are no weeds here. Well, it used to be from here to the bloody top of the hill, and we've fixed a whole lot of that stuff. So I think while we keep getting criticised for loss of diversity and all of those sort of things, and we've got to do more in that space, we've done a hell of a lot too.
Yeah, I think so many... firstly, I think in terms of a 15-year cycle, things go round and in 15 years they get forgotten and have to be reinvented. So I think I'm on the fourth appreciation of the importance of superphosphate. And it'll become, with what's happening with prices now of fertiliser, it'll become too expensive, and in 3 or 4 years' time, people will be giving us all of the reasons that they can't afford to use it, as has happened if you wind back. I pick up on the changing landscape, and Cam mentioned it, but driving over Flagstaff Hill, which is to the west of Ballarat, I was leading a tour for the Williamson Foundation of people from Melbourne, and I got the bus to stop at the top and look out over the plains and get people to tell me why there were so few trees there. And it was because of mining and farming and wood for houses, they told me. And then I was able to tell them, well, the trees that you see are trees that have been planted by farmers, pretty much, because it was pretty much treeless when you look out there. If you look at the landscape now, compared to what it was before Landcare, it is totally different. And if you go back before that, and Leanne mentioned there was so much government help, when I started work, there was still serious soil conservation work, hundreds of paddocks that you would not be game to drive in at night because you could fall into a gully that, you wouldn't get out of. Really deep, 2 or 3 metres deep, soil erosion. So those things have changed. I think the thing that's constant and is so wearing is the fads. The fads for which there is no evidence. There's lots of people providing advice and they live in an evidence-free world. And I'll lead with the chin, the term regenerative agriculture at the moment. It's a wonderful philosophy. But when people tell me that they want to improve their farm on regenerative grounds, I say, fine, what are you going to measure and how often? How do you know whether it's going to improve? I mean, I think the whole idea of regeneration is fantastic. But that whole movement is a philosophy and it's likely to be a fad. And there's been lots of fads. So as consultants, you need to be really careful about jumping onto a fad.
Penny.
It might be too late for me now, but you've talked about your journeys getting into being a consultant, and what would be maybe something that you wish you would have known in those first few years or done differently now that you've got the gift of hindsight as consultants running your own businesses or within larger businesses, that you might be able to provide some pearls of wisdom to us? That's not just for Mike, that's for anybody.
Well, I think I think up until the age of 35, if I'd recognised that I'd had 2 ears and 1 mouth and used them in that proportion, it would have been a good idea. I should have listened more. The only other thing that I'd do really differently, I think, if I wanted to start a consultancy, I'd go and work for one. But other than that, I wouldn't change it much. Still would have married the same woman.
Continue.
Oh well, I mean that's it, Meg. Nobody's asked me about what I should have said, the important stuff. I live at Yendon with my wife for 53 years, and our 4 children come home to visit us often, bringing grandchildren that are becoming more intelligent and acceptable to talk to all the time. Intelligent conversation and good red wine. I mean, what else do you want?
Won't be able to top that, but I reckon early on, if I'd learnt this thing which I now call the head, heart and gut of decision making, I would have been miles better off. I thought that consulting was all about being technically the best, knowing the latest stuff and being able to tell people the latest stuff. And I've realised now that is just it's an important but a small part of what you need to be able to do. And so being able to read people, being able to reshape that technical information to the way the client is rather than the way I like talking about it or the way I would naturally talk about it, I wish I'd learnt that much, much earlier. And the expression I say, I do a few of these different lectures at Melbourne Uni and stuff like that, and I say to them, best expression you can learn if you think you've got an idea for a farmer is just to say, what's your experience been with such and such, before you tell them that's what you should do. And that simple phrase, what you're doing is you're recognising that they've been around the block a few times, they know stuff, and you're honouring that stuff. And if I'd learnt that early on, instead of going, this is what you should do, this is what I reckon's the problem, I would have been much better off. So I wish I'd learnt that earlier.
Can I just prompted by Cam, add something? It's really dangerous to ask people why they're doing something, because often they don't know. They're doing it, they're not sure why, but they'll make up a reason. So you've got to ask the why question without asking the why question.
Andrew, pearls of wisdom?
I think these guys touched on it, but the listening one and trying to find out what people are wanting to change or improve is a huge one. I think you just think sometimes you turn up at a place and you've got all the ideas on what they should do, and a lot of time they're just not interested in some of those things. So I think, and particularly in that early phase, getting their trust and spending time with them, knowing what their skills are before you go and try and change all this stuff. If you try and change a heap of stuff day one, I think you lose them, and they don't have any trust in you to start with anyway. So I think just take time to build rapport before you make sort of sweeping changes. And the other one is, I think you've got to offer something, as in people need to know what your services are. I fell into the trap of, for quite a while, I ran lifetime U groups and had people go through those, they finished, and a few of them would say, oh, can we keep doing this? Can we keep working with you? I go, oh, yeah, you can. Yep. And we'd walk away, and then they'd ask again in a couple of months, how can we pick up what we were doing? And like, oh, yeah, we'll do it. But at some point, one of them rang me up and he said, Whaley, there's a few of us that want to do some work with you, but you're not offering anything. You haven't told us what you can do, what it's going to cost, what we get out of it. Can you just bloody pull your finger out and offer us something? So that night I wrote out a bit of an offering, and I emailed it to these 24 guys at Wagga that I'd put a lifetime U group with, and within a week 12 of them had said, yeah, we're doing it. And I was like, oh shit, that's awesome. Like, I thought I'd get one or two, but the point is, unless they know that you're offering something, how the hell can they jump on board it? So I just think there's a bit to be said about actually taking the time to put together a service offering, and when people ask you for it, you don't don't go and send it out in the post to everyone, but when people ask you, then they clearly want to engage with you. To give them something that lays it all out is been the biggest sort of pearl of wisdom for me.
What they said, and I guess I always have this little mantra that I play to myself, which is never assume anything, and so I just kind of overlay that with everything I do, and it stands me in pretty good stead.
I think Leanne's repeated that to me and Ben on some committee meetings.
Could I just pick up
on
something,
occasion.
Meg, of what Andrew said about this, knowing what you offer people? One of the greatest things I've learnt that I can offer people is another farmer who's done something that we're talking about. And it comes back to your point about that peer-to-peer learning and what PDSs and all that stuff are. You know, I have people now that value me because I know someone else has done something and can give me a referral. So I don't tell them you should do such and such. I'll say, do you know so-and-so? Yeah, I know so-and-so, know them well. Ask them about it because they've done something similar and they'll give you their experience. So my value is actually in the connection, not in the information.
Any other questions from the floor? I've got a whole list here. Mike didn't know the answer to this one, so I'm going to ask Leanne first. They did have a bit of a heads up with some of these questions. This question actually came from Sarah, who ran the panel in Brisbane a few weeks ago. And she had been talking at morning tea time with some of the younger people in the room about imposter syndrome. We've got quite a few young people in the room here today, and if I may be so frank, I reckon that women suffer from it a bit more than men do. So I'm picking on the only female in the panel to go first and say to Leanne, how did you or do you tame your imposter syndrome, and what tips would you have for our young people starting out?
It's still a bit of a beast. When Keely and Joe put the pressure on me to sit on the panel, I'm just like, oh no, you don't want me. So it's a work in progress. But I did a leadership program in 2013 that went for 12 months, and that was sensational. It just it creates a sense of self-awareness, so you understand yourself better, and so you know when you've got this ugly little dude over your shoulder having a crack at you, and it also just builds your confidence and builds your capability. So I found that the lead experiencing training in leadership and communication is really powerful.
Thanks, Leanne. Anybody else want to volunteer their opinion? Do you guys suffer from imposter syndrome when you sort of feel as though everybody else thinks you're the expert, but you actually don't think you are?
If we don't answer, we're in strife, aren't we?
Well, I don't know. You might just prove my point.
I'll make a couple of comments. I struggle with the term a little bit, but I think the times that I feel like it could happen is when you don't know something and you don't know it. Like, just be honest and tell people you don't know it. It's nothing. I've forgotten his name. Ken Solly. I spoke to a group with him one time, and he rang me up afterwards. I got home because I didn't know something, and I sent him an email as soon as I got home where I'd researched it, and I didn't really think much of it. But he rang me up. No, that's right. He sent an email to Dave Rendell, who I was working with, and just about how impressed he was with it. But anyway, the point is, if you don't know it, just say you don't know it, and then research it. Like, there's nothing more powerful than actually being able to... What?
You've got no idea.
Well, anyway, no, maybe I don't. But I don't know that I've got no idea, so I'm right. I don't know. I just think you've got to be... And I guess at times, I think you've got to do the background work so that you do have confidence. And if you think about it, you go, well, do I know this? Do I not? Well, I do know it, so why aren't I confident that I do know that? I don't know, just sometimes trying to take the emotion out of it and look at it. I'm probably good at looking at things black and white. You either do know it or you don't. If you don't, learn it.
I'd back that up. It's okay to say, I don't know. You know, I mean, sometimes you think you're there as the expert, and that's what they're paying you for, so you're expected to know everything. Sometimes you don't, you know, but if you're willing to get back to people, so I don't know, but I'll try and find out for you, that helps. The other side of the imposter thing, and I'm just thinking of a bloke that I've worked with for about 20 years, a client, and he always remembers this other fella that came out and made up stuff. Okay, that's the imposter. And he keeps telling me every time we meet, oh, do you remember so-and-so? He couldn't tell shit from clay. Every time we meet 2 or 3 years later, he says the same expression about the same person. So if you're the imposter, you're not forgotten. Okay? If you give them good advice, sometimes you are forgotten. You know, it just sort of moves on. They don't think much about it. But if you're the imposter, you'll never be forgotten. And the industry's bloody small, so don't be one.
Can I just have a little reply?
Yeah.
The imposter isn't just, it's telling you that you don't know it even when you do.
Yeah. Doubting your own skills.
I answered Meg's question by saying, I don't understand what you're saying, and rest my case.
So I think we've proven our point here, have we? Please. Yeah.
Maybe I won't publicly acknowledge anymore. Now that I've got a microphone, I suffer from imposter syndrome terribly. I had a total, like when you guys asked me to do this, I was like, I can't do this. That is ridiculous. I can't stand up and talk about this. There are so many people that know so much more about this. And so even though I have read a lot about this, I still don't trust it. And that's what I think imposter syndrome is. And I've worked with a lot of vet students and do see it more in female vet students. It's certainly not exclusive, but there are a lot of people that I've worked with who suffer from it, up to really experienced people that you think, oh, you know, I look up to them massively and they suffer from it. And it's a continual, for those of us who do suffer from it, I think it's a continual work in progress. And I look to people like Andrew who can say, well, look it up and own it. And I look to that and I listen to it and I think, yeah, okay, maybe I should just think about that and believe in myself a little bit more. Yeah.
Really good advice, Elsa. Thank you.
Can I just
Go first.
No, it's just prompted. It just prompted something. A few years ago, there was a project in Victoria called Beef Check, which was run with private consultants, Beef Improvement Association, Victorian Department, and funded by Meat Research Corporation. And it was a whole lot of groups. And there was I'd been involved in developing the concept of Beef Check. I'd done the application to MRC. We'd got the money. I was on the board of managing it, and we actually handled the money. So I knew a bit about what was happening, but I hadn't run any Beef Check groups. And there was a group going begging at Ballarat, and we couldn't get anybody to do it. And somebody said, well, you can do it. And I said, no, I'm not qualified. And they said, well, you are. You've got your Cert 4 in training, and you've got your progrades, and your blah, 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 blah. So I said, okay, so I've look at it. And when I looked at it, day one was to really understand progrades. And although I had a tick, I had a certificate to say that I understood progrades, I was not confident that I could deliver without a bit of a notebook, bit of a cheat sheet, or something. And my belief is that you should not be delivering, unless you're going to the field day to deliver something, and there's a flood, and you've got to be taken across by flying fox. So when you arrive at the field day, all you've got is you. You've got nothing else. If you can't deliver under those circumstances, don't. So I put up my hand and said, I can't do it. That's, I think that's what we all need to think about.
Yeah, so maybe the question's a bit more about how you back your own ability or your own confidence, I think is probably... So I misinterpreted that. I thought, how do you stop being a charlatan and telling people crap that's not true just to make $1 out of consulting?
Stop selling carbon credits.
Which is, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if it's that sort of question, I think it is just exactly as Mike said. If you can't get up there and feel confident enough that I know my topic well enough, and I used to be shocking at it when I started. Hated public speaking, hated all of that. But it was just over time and saying I'm confident to this level, and I'd do it and I'd reflect on it and say, yeah, I did all right in that. Go a bit further, go a bit further. Don't overstep. If I didn't know, I didn't know. Said I didn't know. Becomes a lot easier as you get older on in the piece to say I don't know, because there is that weight on you when you get up there to think I should know all of this. That's why people are there listening to me. But yeah, it's a confidence thing, and building confidence is a very individual thing, Meg. I don't think you can say the way you build confidence is just do this, but you've got to find it.
Great advice, Cam. Andrew, did you have another additional? No? Very good. Anybody else in the audience? Feel free to stick up your hand if you've got anything. Kirsty?
Complete change of direction here from the imposter syndrome. So the businesses that we work with, the game is they've got to be profitable and cash flow is king. How do you, as probably more the private consultants, it's a big step to go away from that salary that drops into your bank account every fortnight, you know how much it is. How do you risk-proof your businesses to be able to manage cash flow, keep the families, keep the kids at school, pay a mortgage? Got some tips?
For the consultant or for the farmer?
For the consultant.
Oh, mine's diversity. Low cost base and diversity. So we don't have an office. Our office is at home. So if you looked at our cost of operating our business, Fiona and I, it's really small. It's a deliberate choice, and that's why when I mentioned that we don't employ people, because all of a sudden their costs were rising, and you've got to get to a critical mass before you get enough people in there to contribute to it. So that was one. But secondly, diversifying where your income stream comes from. So that's why I have private clients, but not all private clients. So I do a bit of lecturing at Marcus Oldham. That's why I do some project work. So I've diversified over the years because... And it's a risk management strategy. It's as simple as that. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It holds true in anything.
I work for someone now, so it's sort of changed. But when we started the vet clinic, I think the big thing is budget and know your numbers and forecast them out, because you should be able to see the deficit. I remember when we started just how tough that 12 to 18 month period was as we were growing as a business, but our the outstanding accounts were growing as a result, and farmers are not quick payers. I know that with myself, what I do with clients is it's just a quarterly payment, so that you're not sitting out waiting for a 12-month payment, but I reckon that helps just sort of get the evenness. But I think, I know they're two things, but I think if you budget in advance, you should be able to. Well, everyone's in a different situation, aren't they? But if you can forecast what you need to get through the next 6 months, hopefully from then on it'll be okay.
Mike, the tip would be don't go into consulting just after being a farmer.
But if by accident you find yourself there, look, I agree with what Cam said about keeping the costs down. And we've got an office which originally was one room in a corner of a shed, and then we gradually took over the shed, and then we added on some more. It works pretty well, and it's respectable. But it's a very low cost option. But we are not a low cost business. We've got a team of about 20, which is small compared to Pinion, but you can either go down the path. I think you can either go down the path that Cam and Fiona did of saying we're not going to employ anybody, or only employ a minimal number of people, or you can do what I did and say, if you think when I started the business, I knew enough about cropping, enough about sheep, enough about cattle, enough about pastures to be able to consult in those areas. There was no breed plan. There was no progress. There was no lifetime ewe. There were none of those things. So as all of those technical things started to appear on the horizon, technical way of doing things rather than just the training as a farm manager, I believe that I didn't have the skill to be on top of all of them, so I started to get people around me that had the skill. As far as future-proofing concerned, you never have, you never will. So I want to see in the first week of each month what the business position is. if we close the business tomorrow, would there be a pile of money there to distribute amongst the shareholders, or would we have to write out a cheque? Well, you don't write out cheques now, but you know, would you have to pay some money? So that's what I want to know. We try and keep our costs, we keep a good handle on the costs. We get our accounts out on time, and we make sure we've got a diversity, so that when we're doing the budget for next year, probably half the income is solid from projects that we know we've got in front of us.
I just had another quick thought. When Mike said that, you know, there's sort of two business models. So the business model that I run, I still have I currently have multi-million-dollar contracts in the business, and there's two of us. Okay, and the reason why we can deliver that is I have a whole other group of consultants that I work with, and we have these different consortium that come and go that we pull together as we need to with certain skill sets that we've got, but they all operate independently in subcontracts. So I've got them all subcontracted to me. The most I had at one stage was 17 people. So he could say, I employ 17 people. I don't. I don't employ anybody. But we're running very big operations across multiple states. I've just found over time that I know I can work with these people, and Meg's one standing up there now that we're negotiating a couple with, that's the way we'll deliver. So it doesn't cut you out of these bigger opportunities. You just got to think a different way and use a different model. And the model when I first started is you've got to grow your business. And I took grow your business to employ people, and that's when we got down this path. Well, I was spending all my time chasing money and worrying about people and staff development and all those sort of things. And it's not me. It's not me. And we weren't big enough to employ someone else to do it because we couldn't afford to do someone else to do it. So I was sort of in that sort of trap zone. So I think there is a second model, and you guys here today and drinky poos afterwards is the time when you start creating those contacts. You learn who does what, and you understand, gee, if we got together, we could actually have a crack at a $500,000 thing, where I couldn't do it myself in my business the way I sit.
And you also work out who you do and who you don't want to work with.
Yeah, we've had that conversation too, haven't we?
It's really important, yeah. Leanne, have you got something to contribute? No? Okay. We've got 5 minutes left. Is there one, Penny?
So just flowing on from that last conversation, and now I know why Cam's here, it's for the drinky poos. Yeah, you don't have to give definitive answers to this or numbers, but another valuable thing for early career consultants, I guess you call them, is how to value your time. And I think that flows on, I didn't catch the name of the last question there, but making sure there's cash flow coming in. But I think people have when they're starting out consulting, is how you value your time on paper and how to work out a dollar figure for certain projects. And it's really hard to charge yourself out because really you're the asset in the business, you and your brain and what you can do. So how did you work that out?
Well, I guess there's two levers you can pull. It's the hours and your rate that you charge. And so, we look at different rates for different jobs, essentially. So, bigger jobs, you've earned the work, you've got 3 years' worth of work ahead of you versus, smaller jobs, higher risk. So it's a matter of adjusting your rates depending on the type of work.
I think it's really important that you sit down and, again, you do a budget, right? And just really simple, there's about 1,000 hours a year that you'll charge out. That's 5 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, isn't there? So that's 25 times 50 is 1,250. But then you go and take your annual leave and you get sick and you have public holidays and all that sort of stuff. So it's back to about 1,100 hours is all you can charge out in a year. For those that are employed, let's say, simple numbers, you want to make 100 grand a year, and so that's $100 an hour that you've got to charge just to pay yourself, and then as an employer, whack 15% on that, so you're at $115 an hour, then you've got a car, you've got electricity, you've got all these sort of costs, which I know for me are about $30,000 a year. So you're very quickly up to $140, $150 an hour just to just to break even. That's before the business makes any money out of you. And I reckon if you're employing someone, you want to be making 50 grand a year out of employing them, because for the first 12 to 18 months, they're going to cost you money. So you're going to be down 50 grand, I reckon. So just really simple terms, knowing that number, I reckon it's $200 an hour for 5 hours a week, 5 hours a day, is actually the bare minimum for people, like from an actual numbers perspective, which I think we have to appreciate that. And I know that we've employed a lot of vets over the years, and often they think they're making a lot of money for the business, and a lot of the time they're probably charging out 4 hours a day, and generally we charge them out about $250 and they don't make any money at all for the business. So that efficiency of getting work done is really important, but also charging and making sure you don't ever discount, because I think that's can really creep in. You can go, oh, I did 2.5 hours on that, I'll charge them 2. And if you do that twice a day, you've just meant that the business doesn't make any money of you, and when you want a pay increase, no one can do it because there's no income. So just be aware of those costs, I think.
I'm going to do a quick plug for a webinar that Andrew spoke at. Doing your job for you, girls. It's up on the MLA website, yes, to go and have a look. And he did an excellent presentation on charge-out rates, and was very generous with putting some of his figures in there. So now you've got the whole room going to go and see what you earn, Andrew. So that's good.
I don't think I said that.
Any other advances, Cam?
No, only quickly. I've learnt to charge my hours accordingly, because I can end up with doing 5 or 6 jobs in a day. And so I usually round to half hour or quarter hour. My brother's an engineer, he works for a business I do every 6 minutes. You've got to write down what you're doing every 6 minutes on the way through. And I aim to do 8 hours of billable hours a day. And if you do that 5 days a week, a couple $100 an hour, and don't shortchange, as Wiley said there, if it's 2.5 hours, it's 2.5 hours. That's what you put down. And you'll soon test it in the market of whether they want you there and back again. But I think that important, A, to keep good records for that, and secondly, be really focused. When you're at work to do stuff, and don't turn up for an 8-hour day and bill for 3. What the hell have you done with the other 5? If the other 5's piss farting around doing other things, do that out of work hours. I start at 8, I finish at 5:30. That's it. That's my set time. Never work on weekends, never do any of that. But I'm really focused. When I'm there, I do the job. People answer emails 20 times a day. I don't. Check the emails first thing in the morning, check again at lunchtime. You'll have to wait because I'm focused on this other job, which I can charge out to, because it's very easy to think, what have I done for 8 hours? And you work out the other 3.5 hours of billing time. Kills you in a consultancy. Absolutely kills you. Okay, so it's that discipline that I've learned that makes a big difference. And if you can do that with a low cost base, as I said, you can make some good money out of consulting.
Mike?
I agree with everything that Cam said. I see the hours slightly differently. We work on 40 hours a week at 70%, which is 28 billable, for 40 weeks of the year. And the rest of the weeks of the year are taken up with professional development and holidays and sick leave and personal leave, blah, 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 blah. And the 28 hours a week chargeable, there are always things that you need to do which you can't charge for. So we're a bit, going for 100%, good on you, but I wouldn't try and do that. But yeah, make sure you bill your time. And it's only you, Mike. What's that? He's when it's only you. Yeah. And things like Cam's saying, deal with the email in chunks. Don't be interrupted by it. I put if I've got to concentrate on something, I turn my mobile off and put my desk phone on Do Not Disturb. Things like that, so you can, because otherwise you're halfway through and then, where was I up to? And make sure you charge, and then make sure your clients know how they're being charged, and get the bill out quickly while they're happy with the conversation. Don't get it out 6 months later.
I was a bit cheeky with you, Andrew, before. That session that we had with you online was really, really valuable. So please go and look it up if that's of interest and you need to know. you talked about the way you bill your clients and the first visit that you have with them and the structure that you put around that. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
After I said no discounting, yeah, that's good. I just have a thing where, so I charge per quarter, but look, I'm a big believer that you want to work with clients and you want to stay with those clients for a long time. It's really, there's a lot of time invested in going and sitting down with a new client. So I think building rapport early is really important. So what I do is, if I'm meeting with them, what's today, September, right? So it's normally I'd be billing in August and then November, so the middle month of each quarter. I wouldn't send them a bill for this 30% of the quarter that I've started working with them. I would always delay it, and I think it's a really simple thing that if you want to work with someone for 5-10 years, if you give up on that tiny little bit initially, I just think it's, I don't know, it seems to, they actually ring quite a bit and they go, when are you going to send me a bill? And I don't know, it just seems to build rapport. So, I just build quarterly, but yeah, if they might get a free month in there, but longevity of clients in what we do is huge, because I find you're spending almost half as much time after you've been working with someone for 3 years, but you're still charging them the same amount, or I am, because everyone's on a set amount for the year. But it's all up in your head, so the knowledge, they can't just get rid of you and grab you, Cam, but if he hasn't been working in the business, they're starting from scratch. So they want your IP, and I just think it's really important you try and work with people for a long time. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we've got time, but I'm going to be really cheeky and ask everybody to give me like a 30-second answer to this one, because it's actually a little bit about life rather than just business, which we've been talking about today. But like, work's only 8 hours a day, and you've got the other rest of the time to, that you're not working. So what's your top tip for building a rewarding career and a rewarding life?
Imposter syndrome for me on that one.
Sorry, I just asked the question again.
What's your top tip for building a rewarding career, and how does that give you a rewarding life? Or does it?
Oh, well, be true to yourself. Do what you enjoy doing. And when I said before, never ask a farmer why, ask yourself, why is this farmer talking to me? Why is this farmer farming this farm? Why are they farming this farm in this way? Understand that. You'll understand your client. You'll see their business grow and get the reward as well as the financial reward.
Yeah, I'd probably go with the work-life balance bit. It's very easy when you get a phone call at 9:45, and it's one of your clients that's just had an idea and just wants to run something past you. No, I'm not answering at 10:15. It goes to message bank, and 8 o'clock in the morning, I'll ring back. And this is a job, and a consultancy job, it's very easy to get consumed with working what I'd call out of hours. And you just think, I need to reply to so-and-so, yes, they'll want this to be urgent. But I think getting that, and when you first start out, that's really hard, because you think everything's really important. But you find at the end of the day, most people respect the work-life balance, because most of them want it themselves. And so I just say to people, look, if I don't answer, I'll call you back as soon as I can. And they've got used to that. They put up with it.
Yeah, I probably still struggle with this a bit, but I sort of a bit of a yes man. I like to say yes to certain things. But I think plan ahead. In December every year, just map out the 12 months in advance and set all my dates for when I'm going to go and visit clients. And the first thing I do is put in the holidays that I want, and I just think that's really important that you put them in, because it's amazing how quickly you can get to September and realise that you haven't really had a break. So just plan your holidays before you plan your work.
Yeah, I'm not sure how people get to the end of the year and have leave still banked up. I'm always in debt. I'll agree with Mike. The being true to yourself and not taking on stuff just because you think it's going to make you look important or build prestige or bring in lots of dollars. If it doesn't mesh with your values, then I'd say don't go there. And the other thing, I think it's about being collaborative, building relationships. Like that's one of the things that is really important in your personal life and in your work life. And it's one of the things I think we're a gregarious herd animal. And so I think like the livestock that we work with, maybe that's why we're all in the same room. So just I think that's really important, and also just the learning in your personal life, the leadership course that I mentioned earlier has been hugely beneficial not only in my work life but my personal life. So I think just taking lessons in work to life and lessons in life to work, and yes, you need to have set hours, but the things that your values and what makes you tick are across both, aren't they?
That wraps us up. And talking of work-life balance, we're going to go and have a beer in a minute. Can we please give our panel a huge round of applause?